Welcome to a special edition of the CVC Insider to preview two regional championship football games featuring a pair of Chagrin Valley Conference schools eager to punch their tickets to the state's Final Four. I'm Steve Hare, the Chagrin Valley Conference Sports Information Director, and I'm excited to take you inside the games thanks to the presenting sponsor of CVC TV, Ohio's Center for Oral, Facial, and Implant Surgery. We'll take a look at both the Division 5 Region 17 matchup between Perry and the Division 6 Region 21 semifinal between Kirtland and Mogadore. We'll hear from Perry coach Bob Geswich, as well as local media personalities who share their knowledge of the teams they have covered throughout the season. Up first, Perry looks to avenge a regional championship game lost to South Range, who went on to win the Division 5 state title last fall. The Pirates are eager to avenge that loss, a setback that inspired them throughout the offseason and each week of the regular season.
I'd be lying if I said they haven't talked about that at all. But I think the major part is our kids are just excited for another week. And one of the things that I talked about is how often do you actually get an opportunity to see how much you grew in a year? And that's where we're at right now, is we get to see what our growth is. How close are we to that upper echelon? And obviously South Range is there. They haven't skipped a beat from last season, and they're the defending champs, and I mean they look very championship caliber right now. So we're all excited. I just think, this group of kids, they're pretty awesome. And they're just a group that's excited to play, period.
Despite Perry's success this season, Coach Geswich knows it won't be easy to knock off the defending state champion Raiders. On film, South Range looks just as good or even better than it did last year when the Raiders beat the Pirates 49-21. The Raiders averaged over 42 points per game last season and entered tonight's game putting up nearly 37 points per contest. It won't be easy for Perry to pull off the upset, but the Pirates will take any advantage they can gain.
If they get some food poisoning on Friday, that'll help a lot. I don't know. That's a great question. Even when you watch film, even when you do things like that, you don't necessarily know who another team is. And we saw live last year who South Range is. They're physical. They're extremely quick. They're extremely confident in what they do, like any other great team. We've really just got to focus on us. And I'm not a huge cliche guy, but that's where we're at, is we got to keep focusing on us, and every game is a measuring stick for us. Early in the season, we had a couple of them to see where we were at and how we had progressed in the off season, and hopefully we continue to get better throughout this week. And on Friday, we play our best, and if we play our best and South Range plays their best, whoever wins. So we're just excited for that opportunity, man.
As good as South Range is, Coach Geswich is most concerned with preparing his team to continue to play at the high level that has led them to a second straight regional championship game.
I worry more about the controllables, right? And this is so, you're not going to believe me when I say this. I never really worry about wins and losses. Even after the game, I don't really worry about wins and losses. I'm more concerned with, how did we do? Did we perform to our highest level? Did we go as hard as we could for as long as we could to the best of our ability? Because there have been times where we've lost, and there's nobody that hates losing more than I do. My income is partially, if not majorly, tied into this, right? I don't get hired at Perry if I'm not a football coach. I don't get hired at Jerome if I'm not a football coach. And then obviously I have to do a good job at my other jobs, but that's what got my foot in the door. So there's nobody that has more vested in winning than I do. However, I'm more interested in, did we perform up to our ability, right? Because sometimes you can't help if that other team has 6 all-state kids or a freak of nature, or if you do get some injuries that line up. Okay, great. So what now? What? And our answer is, we're just going to keep trying to play to the best of our ability. So the wins and losses piece is it's probably the worst indicator of success in this occupation. And I know that sounds really weird, but I've seen some really, really bad football coaches who win a lot of football games. And I've seen some really, really good football coaches who have 500 seasons and are killing it every day and doing everything right. And sometimes there are things outside of their control that impact that.
Adding to Perry's challenge tonight is an internal battle to spread the wealth among Perry's talented offensive players, including quarterback Walter Moses, running back Jaden Studio, and athletes Braden Richards and Owen McCoon, among others. Richards previously played quarterback, and he's a phenomenal athlete who can hurt defenses in any number of ways. McCoon's offensive production was a bit limited during the regular season due to his importance in the middle of Perry's defense, but he's had a huge postseason, and the Pirates could benefit from him having another big game on Friday.
Well, I think what helps is a lot of those guys are versatile. Braden, when we came in here, was the quarterback, and then there was Walter came in the year behind him. Walter was a freshman my first year here. Braden was a sophomore. And so Braden started and played that whole season at quarterback. So he has the ability to play there. Walter came on his sophomore year, and they rotated a little bit at that role, but primarily it was Walter there. So that gave Braden the opportunity to play running back, play some wide receiver. Extremely valuable to us on the defensive side. Owen McCoon, it's funny you say he's starting to come on. That's us limiting him offensively because he's so important on what he does on the defensive side of the ball. But he has the ability to get in the backfield, the ability to play tight end, the ability to play wide receiver. And Stu's our primary back, Studio, but he can also go out and catch a couple passes. So one, I think that helps. Two, I think that the kids know that they're going to get their touches. We never, really track those things, but we do talk to them about, hey, here's how we're going to try to get you the ball. Here's what we're going to do. But all in all, I think the biggest piece is those guys are just invested in winning and doing everything that they can to put their team in the best position to succeed. I think we look at the last 2 weeks, Walter hasn't thrown the ball very much, and he's perfectly fine with that. There's some things that we wanted to accomplish the past 2 weeks, and he's been really good with distributing the football and making his checks at the line in our run game and things like that, so that those guys are successful. So I think that there's a level of selflessness that helps out quite a bit as well.
As dangerous as the Pirates are on offense, Perry's bread and butter is its dominant defense. The Pirates have allowed just 85 points in 13 games and allow less than a touchdown per contest. Coach Guesswich is impressed with the execution of his defense, and he sung the praises of the defensive coaching staff led by assistant coach Scott Niedzwiecki.
Actually, our defense has been doing an amazing job. We're very, very fortunate to have a strong defensive staff. Coach Niedzwiecki has been a head coach previously, so he's got that background. Very, very good at what he does, very good at teaching it to the kids, very good at getting them to understand and putting it in their terms. And then his support staff over there with Coach Enrico, Chrisinger, and Perry, they just do an amazing job. And you talk about selfless, defensively, guys just selling out, doing their jobs, filling their gaps, taking on their blocks so that other guys can be free to run, I think is major. And we have, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I'll die on this cross or on this sword, whichever way you want to go with it. I think being a high school defensive coordinator is one of the most difficult jobs in all of football. And what I mean is, one, most schools, probably 90% of the schools, who you have is who you have, right? You're not hitting the transfer portal. You're not getting these move-ins. You don't have these feeder systems. You get who you get. So you have to adapt year to year. The second piece is, if we look at what we've seen this year, you go from spread to under center power formation to triple option to wing T to spread to run to spread to throw to RPO based, and then flavor of the week with some teams. So you see all these different things that your guys have to prepare for. So it's it's not a carbon copy. NFL, they have to an extent be a carbon copy, because guys change teams so much. College football, monkey see, monkey do. And they'll, they all copy each other and do things like that. But, you just see so much diversity in offenses at the high school level. And I would argue particularly the small school level, that defensive coordinator's job is really tough. And those guys do a great job performing and preparing our kids.
Ohio Center for Orofacial and Implant Surgery diagnoses and treats facial pain and injuries. and also offers a full range of dental implants and bone grafting procedures. Look no further than the Ohio Center for Orofacial and Implant Surgery for all of your oral surgery and cosmetic surgery needs. Please visit their website at www.ohsurgery.com.
Welcome back to the CVC Insider. Next up, we'll check in with News Herald football beat reporter John Kampf, who has seen the Pirates several times this season, and he's looking forward to seeing what they can do in the rematch of last year's regional championship game. Kampf knows the Pirates are seeking to avenge last season's setback, but he also knows they remain focused and they won't let that moment get away from them.
I think they're being confident. I don't think they want to look too much at the revenge factor because so much has changed since last year. I know that, both teams are different. So you can't just focus on revenge. You have to just focus on the task at hand, the next play. Don't get too high, don't get too low. They're not the same teams. Obviously last year Billy Skripek has graduated from South Range. Tremendous quarterback that they had. And they still have a very potent offense, a scary team, but so does Perry. This one's going to come down to defense. So far this year, no one has really been able to move the ball a lot on Perry and put a lot of points on the board. When they do, it's usually after the starters come out of the game. But if Perry comes out and runs the ball effectively, the last couple of weeks, so much goes into people thinking that Perry throws the ball around all the time with Walter Moses, that Luke Savon and Braden Richards, that they're just a spread it out. Even like a couple of coaches I talked to before last week's game from Garrettsville Garfield said that this team throws the ball around a lot, and Perry didn't. They just came out and ran the ball down their throats. Jaden Studio had more than 200 yards rushing. If they can do that and run the ball effectively, it's going to open up what the passing game is going to be able to do. I think that, Guesswich always says we're going to take what the defense gives us, and teams right now have been trying to take away the passing game, and that's let Jaden Studio run wild. We'll see how South Range defends them, but I think first and foremost you need to stop the run against them because I tell you what, these last couple games Perry just run the ball so effectively, more than 300 yards a game in the last 2 weeks.
According to Kampf, the keys to Perry pulling off the upset start with establishing the running game led by Jaden Studio, which should help the Pirates pick their spots in the passing game with the boatload of talent they have on the perimeter.
I think the first thing is they've got to establish Jaden Studio on the run, because now all of a sudden those linebackers have to sneak up a little bit to slow down the run. Maybe you're going to get a 6 or 7 man box, and that opens things up on the outside. We've got so many weapons on the outside. Obviously, Luke Savon can break a deep one, and Braden Richards has got that amazing speed. And they've got so much you can do there. And one guy to keep an eye on this game might be Owen McCoon. Owen McCoon is an absolute bull, and if they can get that running game going with Owen McCoon and Jaden Studio, and make South Range get up in the box to defend that run more, it's going to open up the pass that much more.
We're not going to let John Kampf leave us before previewing Kirtland's Division 6 Region 21 championship game against Mogadore. This game also is a rematch of last year's regional championship game. The Hornets scored touchdowns on their first 4 drives of the game and held Mogadore's potent offense out of the end zone for a 30-0 win. Kampf believes this year's showdown could turn out differently if the Wildcats can control the line of scrimmage, something they failed to do last fall.
I think it's going to come down to the line of scrimmages, a lot like it did last year. Last year Kirtland dominated the line of scrimmage against Mogadore. Mogadore's got a very potent run offense, and if they can establish that run offense, then they do some play-action pass off of it. But if you can't run the ball and you find yourself behind early, like Mogadore did last year, then Kirtland's got you. And I think that until a team can come out and establish that against Kirtland and run the ball on them, and also stop Kirtland from running the ball, until that happens, I think that the ball's got to be in Kirtland's favor. The Hornets, if they can get those 2 running backs going, Willie Beers and Rocco Alfieri, that just sets up so much, because not only they run the ball effectively, but their play action pass, when they can, Jake Laverty can play action, get it to Gino Bassini and Will Sale, and their offense then is extraordinarily dangerous if they can run the ball. And usually they do run the ball very effectively. The same thing goes with Mogadore. Cole Reese and Austin Constantine, they both had big nights last week. They ran for 262 yards against Mineral Ridge. That being said, Mineral Ridge can't be confused with Kirtland, what Kirtland brings to the table. So it's going to come down to those offensive lines. Can Mogadore move the ball on the ground to get some momentum going and set up a play action pass, which will work in their favor? They couldn't even come close to doing that last year when they played Kirtland. So that's going to be the big thing on them. And if Kirtland just continues doing what Kirtland does, then they'll be advancing to the Final Four.
One thing Hornet fans can't do is look at Mogadore's schedule and put too much stock into that 20-13 loss to Canton Central Catholic back on September 29th. The Hornets pounded Central Catholic 48-26 2 weeks ago, but Mogadore has outscored its opponents since that loss to the Crusaders 205-27.
Well, the danger in that, and Coach Tiger Laverty and I talked the other day about this, is that you can't look at Mogadore and say, okay, they lost to Dalton, who Kirtland beat. They lost to Canton Central Catholic, who Kirtland beat, because it doesn't work that way. Kirtland coach Tiger Laverty pointed out to his team last week that anything can happen because Villa Angel St. Joseph lost by 22 points to Kenston earlier in the season. Then they came back and they beat him worse than that when they played him again. So Coach Laverty has already started tackling that. He tackled it last week when they played, a team that they were familiar with, Cuyahoga Heights. And hey, one just because something happened in 1 week doesn't mean it's going to happen in another week. What goes on in the minds of a 16 and 17-year-old boy, it can happen. So Kirtland cannot be looking past somebody and saying just because they beat other people or got beat by other people means that we're going to have an easy game. It doesn't work like that.
Kirtland's fast start last season certainly set the tone for their regional championship win, and Kampf believes a team that can steal the momentum early in this contest could be the one advancing to the state Final Four.
I think that if you can get ahead of a team that predominantly runs the ball effectively and put them in a situation where they have to pass the ball to get back into the game, then you've got them. If, for instance, if you're playing Kirtland and you've stopped a run and you get up by a couple scores on them, well, now all of a sudden Kirtland probably has to get out of their bread and butter and throw the ball more than they normally would. And then the same thing, with Mogadore. If you get ahead of them, they might have to throw more and maybe not rely on the pass as much. So I don't think you have to get off to a start like that where you score in your first 4 possessions. But I think that you need to set the tone, like I said before, in the trenches. You need to stop that run. If they're going to score make them go on long drives, not the big hitting plays. And I would say the same thing about Mogadore. You don't want to let Kirtland just start gouging him with Willie Beers' long touchdown runs, Rockaraw Furies, big runs. I think the momentum is just one play away. I don't think you have to get it by 4 touchdowns right off the bat, but that would certainly help them. I'm sure both teams would take that.
According to Kampf, a Mogadore win would be a bit of an upset. To pull it off, the Wildcats have to slow down the Kirtland running game, a task easier identified than accomplished, and then find a way to solve the Hornet defense. Kirtland's keys to victory aren't any different than they've been all season. The Hornets need to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, run the ball effectively, and keep the Wildcats from finding their offensive rhythm.
I would think it would definitely be called an upset just because, with what happened last year, 30-0, and Kirtland's a top-ranked team in the state, and they are very, very upperclassmen laden. I would think that would be considered an upset if Mogadore were to beat them. I think the keys for Mogadore is that they have to stop or at least slow down Kirtland's run. There were times last year when they played, the Rockaraw Fury was dragging people with him, and I'm not saying that he's not going to do it this time. They've got to be able to limit yards after contact. They need to establish that line of scrimmage, get Kirtland third and long or maybe even behind the sticks. But the same thing goes with Kirtland. If they can really, really stop Reese and Constantine, and they did that, they were able to stop that run last year, that's the key. I hate to be redundant, but it just comes down to those trenches. In Kirtland, they play some young guys on that line, but, Matthew Cayley is only a junior, but he's an anchor on that offensive line. And, if they can establish that line of scrimmage and on defense, if they can get, Will Bates and Fortuna to really, hold the fort, be aggressive on defense, put Mogadore behind the sticks or third long, then I think whoever is able to do that is going to come out with the win.
Ohio Center for Orofacial and Implant Surgery diagnoses and treats facial pain and injuries, and also offers a full range of dental implants and bone grafting procedures. Look no further than the Ohio Center for Orofacial and Implant Surgery for all of your oral surgery and cosmetic surgery needs. Please visit their website at www.ohsurgery.com.
Welcome back to the CVC Insider, previewing 2 regional championship football games. Next up, let's get some insight into the Mogadore Wildcats from Portage County Record Publisher beat reporter Jonah Rosenblum, who has covered each of the 4 Kirtland-Mogadore postseason matchups over the past 10 years. Rosenblum knows that last year's loss didn't sit well with the Wildcats, who made some key mistakes they hope to avoid in Friday night's matchup.
Well, I think if there's one thing Mogadore has done incredibly well, and I've been here for 9 years, and they've done it well for longer than that, is I think Mogadore and Coach Matt Adorney, they are masters of motivation. I think they love being the underdog. They sometimes manage to convince themselves they're the underdogs when I don't see how they are the under. I mean, they're 45-time league champions, but it seems like every year they convince themselves that no one thinks they can win the league. No one thinks they can go deep into the postseason, even though they've done it so many times. So I think there's no question the Wildcats will embrace the role of being an underdog. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to win the game by any means, but I think mentality-wise, Mogadore is going to come in angry. They're going to come in like a feisty underdog. That's what they do. That's how they're built. So I think mentality-wise, this is a good situation for Mogadore. I think they enjoy this kind of situation where everyone's counting them out. Obviously, Kirtland's the heavy favorite. Kirtland has earned being the heavy favorite with what they did last year, with what they've done for, the past decade and a half as being the small school power in Northeast, in the state of Ohio, really. So Kirtland deserves to be the favorite, but I don't think Mogadore minds being the underdog, if that makes any sense.
Kirtland is 4-0 against the Wildcats in the postseason, which includes 3 regional championship games and a regional semifinal. With many returning starters on defense, the Wildcats should be more confident heading into their 5th matchup against Kirtland. Rosenblum believes Mogadore's fate rests in its defense being able to rise to the challenge of stopping Kirtland's potent offense.
Well, it's so interesting as I was looking back at some of the past Kirtland matchups, and I've been blessed to be at all of them, at least the last 3, and 17 and 18 were very competitive games. I think both coaches would agree. They both came down to the 4th quarter. Both teams had a chance to win in the 4th quarter in 17 and 18. I think where the Wildcats certainly don't want to repeat is what happened last year. Last year was not competitive. Last year, Kirtland scored touchdowns on all 4 of its first half drives. So that's not Mogadore. Mogadore typically doesn't get blown out like that. And so I think that's probably what weighs on the Wildcats' minds. But I think if you're Mogadore, I think what you've got to be thinking is you return a ton of players from last year's defense. And Mogadore had played a lot of really good teams over the last few years, but they had not played Kirtland since 2018. So I would think for a lot of the members of this defense, a lot of multi-year, 2-3-year starters on this defense, and this defense has been really good. They've held 6 straight opponents to single-digit points. I think what I'm really curious to see, and I don't know, because I know this Kirtland team is as dangerous as ever, and I know what Rocco did last week, and I know how the Hornets have just crushed some really good opponents recently. But what I'm really curious to see is how the Wildcats defense plays, and can the Wildcats defense, which has been so good recently, and which at least got to see the Hornets up close last year, which, what Matt Adorney told me last year is super interesting. He said, look, like Kirtland looks really good on film, but until you see them in person, like as great as they look on film, the crispness of their plays, their physicality, it's different in person. And so I think for a Wildcats defense that saw them in person finally for the first time since 2018 last year, I'm really curious to see how they play. I'm curious to see how linebackers like Will Baskey and guys like Austin Constantine, and they've got a good defensive backfield. I'm curious to see how they handle Kirtland this go around and whether that defense can keep Mogadore in the game.
As always, Mogadore's defense makes it very difficult for opposing offenses to establish any rhythm. But the Wildcats aren't a one-trick pony. They have plenty of talent on the offensive side of the ball as well.
So the defense, I think, is certainly front and center, and the defense has shut down some really good rushing attacks recently. Not to the level of Kirtland, but Rootstown has had a great year. Dawson Morgan's had a great year for the Rovers. They were able to shut down that rushing attack. They shut down Ian Erb and Mineral Ridge last week. So certainly the defense, Will Baskey's a great linebacker to keep an eye on. I always enjoy watching him. On offense, if you look at the Wildcats stats, it's stunning because no one has, crazy stats on this team. The Wildcats are the ultimate spread the ball around. I will say Cole Reese has taken over recently. The Mogadore is basically spreading the ball between 4 or 5 different running backs every single week. But Cole Reese has really come on in the postseason. He had 99 rushing yards last week. He had 156 rushing yards against Pymatuning Valley. But I think to give Hornets fans a glimpse of who the Wildcats are, last week the Wildcats had 3 different runners with 70-plus yards, and that was in a very close game. It was basically a one-score game with Mineral Ridge until the end. So that's kind of who Mogadore is. They're going to spread it out. Cole Reese, Austin Constantine, Aaron Rumschlag are kind of some of their main backs. Watch for Corey Lehner. He's kind of a speedy back who can catch screen passes. He's really good catching the ball. He's really fast running around the edges. And then the other guy you got to mention is Zeke Cameron, who is probably the most experienced quarterback the Wildcats have had. He's basically been starting, I believe, the last 3 seasons. He can throw a good ball, and again, he's got a lot of experience under center.
To beat the Hornets, Rosenblum feels the Wildcats might have to air out the ball a little bit more than they normally do to help soften that Kirtland defense and to help establish their running game.
I do think the Wildcats are going to have to pass it more. The last couple of weeks, and I think that is what Mogadore does best, is they are balanced in terms of spreading the carries out. But I know how good Kirtland is. You have to be multidimensional to beat the Hornets, and I think that's the Wildcats' best shot. They have not thrown it a ton this postseason yet. They haven't had to. I think they threw it 9 times in one week. They threw 10 times the other weeks. They're averaging 9.5 passes over the last 2 weeks. I think it might take more than that this week. I think the way Kirtland is, how physical they always are up front, I think you're going to have to be able to have some downfield threats, and you're going to have to be able to convert some third and mediums, third and long. So I think if I'm Mogadore, I think the defense has to keep you in it, and I do think the offense is going to have to make some big plays in the passing game, which maybe they haven't had to make early in this postseason.
Ohio Center for Orofacial and Implant Surgery diagnoses and treats facial pain and injuries, and also offers a full range of dental implants and bone grafting procedures. Look no further than the Ohio Center for Orofacial and Implant Surgery for all of your oral surgery and cosmetic surgery needs. Please visit their website at www.ohsurgery.com.
Welcome back to the CVC Insider. That's going to do it for this special episode previewing 2 regional championship football games. I'd like to thank Perry coach Bob Gueswich and both John Kampf and Jonah Rosenblum for joining the show to take you inside the games. A special shout out goes to Ohio Center for Oral, Facial, and Implant Surgery for its continued support of CVC TV, which allows us to do so many exciting things for our student athletes and school communities. Best of luck to both the Perry Pirates and Kirtland Hornets as they compete for a spot in the state Final Four tonight. And thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the CVC squads. Hopefully we'll be back next week to preview the state Final Four, and then you can expect to see the CVC Insider throughout the upcoming winter sports season. For CVC TV, I'm Steve Hare. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.